Welcome to This Explainer. Grab a coffee because we need to have a real talk about the realities of that shiny new promotion of yours. You see, getting bumped up to manager is incredibly exciting, but there's a harsh truth that almost no one tells you. Just having a talented team doesn't automatically make you a high-performing manager. In fact, the more talented your team is, the harder it can actually be to get everyone working together seamlessly. Individually, they're brilliant, but collectively, there's serious friction. So today, think of me as your mentor. We're going to diagnose that friction together and get you stepping into your true leadership potential. Here is our playbook for today's session. We'll look at the new manager's trap, break down a real-world team crisis, decode the trust triangle, and map out the energy impact matrix. Then, we'll wrap up by applying all of this to your one-on-ones to really multiply your leadership impact. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the new manager's trap. So, you are an absolute rock star individually, right? But suddenly, your brilliant new team is just struggling to get aligned. Why is your talented team failing? It's a terrifying realization. You might literally be chugging coffee just to survive 60-hour work weeks, and yet your team is sitting there, totally stalled out, waiting for your decisions. You haven't empowered them. You've accidentally become the bottleneck. Here's the trap. You're falling back on old habits. Your old mindset relied heavily on your IQ, your ability to analyze and manage tasks. And hey, that's exactly what got you promoted. But this new role, it requires EQ, emotional intelligence. You simply can't solve team friction by managing tasks better or just working harder. What you actually need is EQ to read the room, foster meaningful connections, and really understand your people.
Moving right along to Section 2, a real-world team crisis.
Let's imagine a major Q3 product launch is looming. The absolute smartest leaders in the room don't just panic over a missed deadline. They're constantly looking for the subtle symptoms. A misdesign handoff to engineering? Well, that means ownership is totally unclear. When everyone just nods along in your crisis meeting, that fake agreement, you're actually looking at hidden conflict. And what about that quiet employee staying online until midnight? That is hidden burnout. You have to learn to sense this silence before disengagement spreads like wildfire. Which brings us to Section 3, decoding the trust triangle. When you start seeing those symptoms pop up in your team, I need you to recognize something absolutely crucial. You do not have an execution problem. You have a trust problem. And to fix it, we're going to apply the trust triangle. The concept is that trust grows when authenticity, empathy, and logic are consistently true within your team. If even one of those sides goes missing, the whole triangle collapses, and so does your team's psychological safety. Let's break these pillars down a bit. I want you to ask yourself honestly, are you showing authenticity? Like, are you doing the right thing even when no one is watching? Second, empathy. Do your people actually feel understood and cared for? Are you listening to understand or just listening to respond? And third, logic. Do your decisions and your reasoning actually hold up to scrutiny? Evaluating your own leadership through these 3 pillars is how you make sure your team feels seen, safe, and truly valued. I really want you to absorb this one. People don't follow titles. They follow leaders they believe in. Authenticity isn't just some clever management tactic. It's a non-negotiable leadership standard. Nobody cares about your fancy new title if they don't believe in your character first. All right, let's jump to Section 4, the energy impact matrix. Once you started building that baseline of trust, your next step is to diagnose exactly where each team member stands using this matrix. High energy, high impact stars, promote and empower them, for sure. High energy, low impact, you coach and redirect. But I want you to pay very close attention to the top left. Low energy, high impact. These are your incredibly talented but totally burned out performers, like that employee working until midnight on the Q3 launch, who desperately need a coaching intervention before they burn out completely. Let's talk about how to help them in Section 5, coaching in one-on-ones. For that burned out performer we just talked about, instead of just dumping more work on them, use these 4 steps in your private one-on-ones. First, literally name the tension out loud to show empathy. Put words to the burnout you're observing. Second, reignite their motivation by shifting their focus from just doing the work to managing the work. Third, use logic to match them to new opportunities based on their true potential. And step 4, which is a real game changer, delegate outcomes with authority, not just tasks. The difference between success and failure here all comes down to weak versus strong delegation. Weak delegation sounds a bit like, hey, can you handle this task? It creates task completion, sure, but zero ownership.
Strong delegation sounds like you own this outcome. Here are the parameters. Now you make the decisions. That transfers true authority. If you want to stop creating more work for yourself, you have to stop handing out chores and start handing out authority.
And that leads us perfectly into section 6, multiplying your leadership impact.
When you combine that psychological safety from the trust triangle with strategic delegation, your role shifts fundamentally. You transition from a task manager to a servant leader. The philosophy here is that your job isn't to be the person with all the answers anymore. Instead, you listen way more than you speak. You empower instead of micromanaging. You act like a bulldozer, removing the obstacles in your team's way. And above all else, you focus on developing your people, not just your task lists.
I just love this quote. Leadership isn't measured by how many people work for you. It's measured by how many people grow because of you. Ultimately, elite leaders don't just put things on their own resume, they put achievements on their team members' resumes. They design systems that consistently produce amazing results by growing confident, capable people who can eventually lead themselves.
So, I want to leave you with one final, provocative question to think about today. What part of your leadership system are you intentionally improving right now? Take a second to really reflect on your own approach. Are you still relying on those old individual contributor habits, or are you actively building a framework of trust and empowerment for your team? The choice is entirely yours, and it starts with your very next one-on-one. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.